All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? We know there's a lot of people who are going to be hopping on. We are going to be recording this so we can share it with folks later. My name is Carrie Kearney, and I'm the Executive Director of 1000 Friends of Iowa, and I'm also part of the Des Moines Citizens Task Force on Sustainability. And we are hosting this panel to talk with communities that have made the commitment to do 100% carbon-free energy in their communities, and for them to talk with us about it. The city of Des Moines is considering a resolution to that effect and making the commitment as well. So this is an opportunity for us to all kind of learn about what it might look like and the benefits that it has, and for a few of the council people who have joined us to be able to ask some questions and participate. So I'm going to go ahead and let Brian also introduce himself, and then we will jump in and I'll quickly run through the panelists and we'll jump in and get started. Just real quick before that, if you see either on the bottom of the screen or top of the screen, depending on how you have it set up, there is a question and answer box that you can ask questions for the panelists. There's also a chat box. What we'd love to have is folks, especially task force members, but others, just go ahead and say who you are and say hello in the chat box so folks kind of know who's here. And then put questions and answers in the question and answer box, and we'll go for there. Brian, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Carrie. My name is Brian Campbell. I'm the Director of Sustainability Education and Partnerships at Central College in Pella. I'm a Des Moines resident, and I've been involved in the task force for a number of years. And our group is all volunteers. We have been working, like I said, for several years. Our mission is to educate and engage the public in Des Moines around sustainability and climate action, as well as to advocate with the city council and city staff to help move forward those goals. And so we're really excited about some of what we've accomplished this year. We have a new sustainability program manager position at the city. We've implemented energy and water benchmarking, and we're working towards a climate action plan, building on a greenhouse gas inventory that we did a few years ago. And this clean energy resolution is one component of what will be part of that plan to help set goals for our energy procurement and to help lay out goals that can help define partnerships that we have with our utility and with others as we move toward those goals.
Thanks, Brian. And we have, as panelists, we have several great panelists. We have Jeremy Greger, who is a city council person with the city of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. We have Kathy Kuntz, who is, now I'm not looking at your specific title, but climate and energy manager with Dane County. We have Abby Finnis, who is with Great Plains Institute and also does work with the Green Step Cities program, who can talk about the city of Minneapolis and some of the other Minnesota communities that have made this commitment. We have Tammy Grunderziek, who is with Xcel Energy, who has partnered with the city of Minneapolis and other communities to help make this commitment a reality. And then we also have Christopher Thomas, who is the senior climate and energy program manager for Salt Lake City, Utah, to talk with us about what they're doing there. So I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Jeremy to start. And if everyone else would just mute themselves while Jeremy's talking. And Jeremy, take it away.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Carrie and Brian and the City of Des Moines. Appreciate this opportunity. I'm at the City of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I serve on the City Council. Been serving since April of 2018. So some of what I'm going to describe is what the city was doing before I was on the council and more active as a citizen in pushing the city in that regard. I will share in the chat a link to our sustainability website for the City of Eau Claire, just so you can peruse that in the future. There's a lot of great resources on there. We're about an hour and a half east of Minneapolis, so we're a little bit in the sphere of the Twin Cities in Minnesota, but we are very much a Wisconsin community. And so an hour and a half by car, but by bicycle, it's about a day. I live car free, so sometimes I ride my bike 90 miles or so. It just takes a little while. But that's, I think, part of, what things we need to be thinking about doing and about the climate action um, and really making our cities as well as our rural areas a place that are more sustainable. So, the Eau Claire is about 70,000 people, and we have committed to 100% renewable energy and carbon neutrality by the year 2050. Hopefully we're going to get there before that. And Xcel Energy is actually our investor-owned utility that actually has a headquarters for their Wisconsin and Upper Michigan service territory right here in Eau Claire, and it's actually in my district too. So, so it's great to have them here represented. Our goal is not just a city municipality goal; it's a community-wide goal, and it was put in place just weeks before I was elected. And it was kind of actually helpful to have an election just a couple days before a vote like that. It was unanimous, and the people really getting behind it because of it was actually because of President Trump pulling out of the Paris Accord a year before we committed to the 100% goal. The president indicated that he wanted to pull out of that agreement, and that really kind of rose up the citizen interest in seeing what the city could do. But it took, a resolution from the city council to really set forward, okay, so yeah, we're maybe upset about the Paris Accord issue, but what are we going to do specifically to match that goal or even exceed it? And we already had a sustainability advisory committee that had been established 4 years earlier, so that was super helpful. We had staff, Ned Noel, who some of you probably know is our sustainability coordinator. Essentially, he's our senior planner, but he's also kind of our expert on sustainability. And he had already been working on, through our sustainability chapter of our comprehensive plan, which has been in place for 11 years. He'd been working with that sustainability advisory committee already on a lot of these different aspects of, implementing renewable energy and getting the community more involved in setting priorities. And ultimately, after doing a community survey, which we found 75% of people wanted to see the city set a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions beyond what Xcel was planning to do. We felt like we were in a good spot to set this 100% goal. There were some things, obviously years before that were helpful. We don't have a mayor. We have a city manager and city council form of government. So each council member kind of has the same amount of power and influence. And so, there's sometimes a lot of work getting everybody on the same page on things, but this was an easy one. All of the votes that we've taken on implementing this goal have been unanimous. And we've actually been able to work and help inspire Eau Claire County and University of Wisconsin Eau Claire and the Eau Claire Area School District to join in 100% renewable energy and carbon neutrality goals. So now there's all these opportunities to work together. And we've had some smaller goals before. We had a 25% renewable energy by 2025 goal, which we've achieved on the electricity sector just by the fact that Xcel Energy is our provider of electricity, and they're about there for us already. But the transportation sector is really the big challenge, which is one of the reasons why I like to walk and bike and take transit and kind of challenge myself in that way. I serve on the Plan Commission and the Transit Commission as well, just because those are really important places to work on sustainability. The implementation, I think, is probably the most important thing. We were lucky in the fact that we had our Sustainability Advisory Committee, and we had staff like Ned Noel, who'd already worked with our partners at the university to study the city's carbon footprint. So having that baseline data was super important for us to feel comfortable knowing where we're starting and where we need to be. Certain data was difficult to get. Sometimes, a business would consider something proprietary or this or that, but eventually, after doing many different annual studies of our carbon footprint, we got to the point where 2015 was our baseline where we felt comfortable with the data. Now we can keep doing more studies to see where we're at. And so by 2030, we want to have a 30% reduction, and we did and that's from 2015 levels. And so we did a renewable energy action plan that we got a grant through the state to do, and we actually worked directly with Xcel Energy on the community involvement and the planning efforts for our renewable energy action plan. And they have a program called Partners in Energy, and you can actually see the logo for that on Tammy's background there. And they really activated that in Minnesota first, but we were the first city in Wisconsin to join that program. And there's now been other cities like the city of Menominee, which is just to our west, that have joined that. So it's really a great thing to be able to partner with a utility on a similar goal. And they've actually set a 100% carbon-free energy goal by the year 2050 about a year ago. And I would have to think that cities, spurring the conversation, have helped them, realize that they need to step up too, and I would say they certainly have. Some of the, I'm not sure where I am at time, but one of the big implementation pieces is the capital improvement side of things and that capital budget for a city, and that's really where we've kind of put our planning efforts like into the budget. So whether that be renewable energy projects like solar, that's kind of the big bucket in terms of investment. But electric vehicle charging stations, bike trails and transit, and building renovations. We actually have a net zero energy building design guide that we created as part of our renewable energy action plan effort. And we're hoping the private sector really takes up that plan. But we're also, we're implementing that on our library renovations. So hopefully we'll have a net zero energy library in a couple of years. And we also did an electric vehicle roadmap, kind of a plan for how we're going to implement electric vehicles. So there's a lot of planning that's ahead of all of us. But then that implementation in our budget, where we show our values there, is where it gets pretty exciting. So I guess that's kind of my overview for City of Eau Claire, and we can go on to Kathy in Dane County. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Great, thank you. Real quick before we go on to Kathy in Dane County, I don't know if the city council members or city staff who are joining us have any questions for Jeremy real specifically, real quick. Okay. All right, why don't we go ahead and go on to Kathy, unless, Brian, were there any questions in the Q&A?
Yeah, why don't we get through the panel and we'll come back to the questions.
Okay. All right, Kathy, why don't we turn it over to you?
Okay, I've got a couple of slides because that keeps me on track. Let me just make those come up for you. So I'm from Dane County, Wisconsin. I have a handy little map there. If you aren't familiar with these, this is the Yale Climate Opinion Maps that show at county and legislative district public opinion on climate change issues. And so Dane County is where Madison, Wisconsin is. We're a county. The main UW campus is there. I shouldn't say that in that way in front of Jeremy, the biggest campus anyway. We're a little over 500,000 residents, and we're the fastest growing county in Wisconsin. We've also got 55,000 dairy cows, mostly dairy cows. So we're a county and we've got some significant rural piece to us. In general, though, Dane County tends to be progressive and relatively resource rich. When you look at things like the Yale Climate Study, 70% of our residents are worried about global warming at this point. So we have a, like Eau Claire, there's been efforts in this space for a while in Dane County. In 2012, our county board passed a resolution about moving toward carbon neutrality, but there wasn't a lot of implementation tied to that. In 2017, our county executive created the Office of Energy and Climate Change and charged us with creating a county-wide, economy-wide climate action plan. And kind of parallel to what Jeremy said, part of the impetus there was Executive Parisi's concern that we weren't seeing at that point leadership at the federal or at the state level in Wisconsin on climate change. The county had done a lot in its own operations, but Joe really felt like it was time for us to take this initiative county-wide, involving residents and businesses, and really demonstrating what could be done on climate action. So when the president announced he was leaving the Paris Accord, we announced we were staying in it. And so our office with the county exec formed a climate council, diverse group of 38 plus stakeholders, hundreds of people on working groups that created that, the climate action plan pictured there in the lower left that we issued this April. And that plan is really our roadmap for starting on our path to deep decarbonization. The plan outlines a strategy where we can cut countywide emissions in half by 2030 and be carbon neutral by 2050. So it's consistent with what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is saying in terms of what we need to accomplish. And so really that has become our vision then for how we're going to implement things county-wide. I want to kind of make two broad points in thinking about all of this. And the first is one that our county exec makes a lot, and that's that clean energy ultimately costs us less. I want to give you two real world examples from Dane County. The picture on the left is at our landfill. For many years, we captured landfill gas and turned it into electricity. As that became less cost effective, as wind and solar became cheaper, utilities weren't willing to pay as much for landfill gas generated electricity. So as those economics changed, we pursued this facility, and this facility captures the landfill gas, cleans it, turns it into pipeline grade methane. So we sell most of the renewable natural gas we produce to Quick Trip, a gas station chain. When you buy in Wisconsin CNG from them, most of it comes from our landfill. So we sell that to them, but we also use it to power our own fleet of kind of growing vehicles. So more than half of Dane County's snow plows run on compressed natural gas at this point. That fuel costs us less than $1.50 a gallon compared to the diesel we were running snow plows on before. And for folks who, I didn't know this previous to this work, a snowplow gets like 4 to 6 miles per gallon. I mean, they are not wildly efficient vehicles because they're pushing snow most of the time. It also reduces the emissions from those vehicles by about 2/3. So we're getting a big jump on all of those pieces. The other thing is, when we built the facility, we deliberately built it in a way that dairy manure digesters could also bring their cleaned renewable natural gas to our facility and load it into the pipeline here. So we're creating a way for local farm digesters to also sell into the pipeline. The facility cost us about $28 million to build, and it will pay for itself in 4 years. So obviously its lifespan is going to be a lot longer than that. And this is why we think about clean energy costing less or making us money, because this becomes a really profitable investment for us as a way to move forward. The other photo here is of a solar farm that's about to go live. So this is a partnership between Dane County and Madison Gas and Electric, one of the investor-owned IOUs that serves our county. The land here, so this is a 9 megawatt array on about 58 acres of land that's part of our airport. So this is part of the fly zone of the airport, which means it's not very good land for very many things. We were able to negotiate a deal with the utility where we leased MG&E this land. They're building the solar farm. We're buying all of the electricity from the farm for our county operations. And all of that math worked out in a way that we'll actually pay $130,000 less for our electricity once this is live than we were paying before the solar farm. So by letting them build it on our land, we had no upfront costs in that. And our electric bills go down as soon as it's live. I think estimates are later this week it might get turned on. So I suggest both of those things because really we're in a moment where the costs associated with a variety of these things are transforming faster than almost we can comprehend it. And so things that might have seemed expensive or idealistic even 2 or 3 years ago are suddenly very cost effective. I could have given an electric vehicle example as easily here as something where the total cost of ownership is clearly lower when you choose electric vehicles, kind of thing. So there's just a lot of bottom line opportunity. And I think part of what we've seen at Dane County is that as a local government in Wisconsin, we're constrained in how much we can increase our operating costs. So the more we can do these things that drive down our operating costs, the better we can run the county, kind of thing. So the last point I wanted to make is a kind of COVID specific point, maybe, that so we issued our climate action plan in April, and we've really been engaging the community and starting to work on some of the kind of community-wide initiatives that help us achieve our goals. One of the things that's becoming really clear is that, particularly now, in a pandemic, when so many things are so stressful for our communities, having success around clean energy feels really good for folks. Okay, there's something really powerful in the accomplishments we're making here. So for example, in Dane County, we have a brand new elementary school that is the first net zero energy school in Wisconsin. That's really exciting stuff for folks, particularly because we're like, we're all trapped in our homes and starving for good news in a whole lot of ways. We've been able to showcase corporate leadership in various ways, and all of that kind of brings home that point that moving toward a clean energy future is beneficial to everyone. It creates jobs, it engenders prosperity. And so I think I had this conversation recently with the county exec that he was like, I really love when we get to talk about climate change because there's all this good news in terms of what's happening. And that's not 5 years ago. If you would have said, well, at some point politicians will say they want to talk about climate change because it's good news, I wouldn't have believed you. But that's where we are now about these things, that this can be really good news and make a really powerful impact for folks. So I'm going to stop there. Let me stop sharing.
All right, great. Thank you, Kathy. That was really good. So I see there is Pat Bodie. I see you've raised your hand. If you will hold on just a little bit, we'll let you ask a question, but we're going to run through our last couple of presentations, if that's okay. So we're going to turn it over to Christopher Thomas to talk about what they're doing in Salt Lake City.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Will somebody just give me a thumbs up if they see it? Okay, awesome. So yes, my name is Christopher Thomas. I'm the Senior Energy and Climate Program Manager for Salt Lake City. I've only been in this job a little over a year, so a lot of this history behind our clean or renewable electricity targets predates me, but I'm happy to give you the information that I've gleaned through conversations with others who've been with the city a lot longer. But anyway, I think this is a fantastic idea. I love it when different communities can share good news and best practices. So we're really happy to be invited. I wanted to start by talking about our municipal, what we call our municipal 100% net renewable electricity target. So when we say municipal, we just mean to support the Salt Lake City Corporation's internal operations. Our airport, our public utilities, our streetlights, our city buildings. So what our target is right now, we first set it in 2016. And we've modified it since then. So what it is now is we said we wanted 50% of the city's municipal electric consumption coming from renewable sources by 2020, so this year. And then we wanted 100% by 2030. And so we have not hit our 2020 goal. However, I do also have some good news to share, which is that just last week, and I've got a little image of the top of the press release to the right there, we announced that we got final regulatory approval for a large new solar farm that we've been working on since 2017. Salt Lake City engaged on this with 5 other large electricity customers, so 2 other local governments, 2 ski resorts, and a university. And so that final approval means that basically the path should be fairly smooth, fingers crossed, for a new 80 megawatt solar farm to be built in Utah, in a place called Tooele County, which is just west of Salt Lake City. And we cannot talk about the exact pricing because that has been designated as confidential. But what we say in the press release is that according to our estimate, with this project, we expect to source almost 90% of our annual electricity consumption from this project, with a less than 2% increase to our annual bills. So there are situations where renewable energy is so cost effective that you can end up saving money on your bill every month. The avenues we have open to us in Utah make that more challenging. So, but we felt like getting to almost 90%, blowing past our 50% interim goal with a less than 2% cost increase was very well worth it for us. And the press release goes on to say that it will support 100 construction jobs, which feels really great to be doing some investments at a time of kind of economic scarcity otherwise. And this project should be up and running by 2023. So that's our municipal target and some of our recent progress. And then, this is just to put this latest procurement into perspective. So Salt Lake City's been investing in rooftop and distributed solar energy systems since 2011. So we've done 17 projects. Hang on one second. Pardon me. Woo. We've done 17 projects, but those have only contributed about 2.8 gigawatt hours of electricity per year. We then participated in a utility sponsored program that's called Subscriber Solar. And that subscription is about 7.2 gigawatt hours. But with this new procurement, we're looking at 100 gigawatt hours per year. So that's why we take such a big jump up to about 90% of our annual electricity needs with this project. So we're very happy about this. Next, I'll talk about our community renewable electricity target. That is a 100% community-wide net electricity target by 2030. And we are very fortunate that we actually do have a pathway to achieve this starting to emerge. So Salt Lake City and a few other local governments in Utah have been really pushing this for several years. And then in 2019, those cities had passed their own resolutions internally, but began work with our utility, Rocky Mountain Power, and in 2019, we're able to pass legislation. So there's actually enabling legislation called the Community Renewable Energy Act. There were administrative rules passed in December of 2019. And according to that, this statute, it basically gave communities until the end of the calendar year 2019, to signal their interest in being part of the Community Renewable Energy Act. And so 23 Utah communities passed these 100% resolutions, so they're now eligible to participate. And there's several more hoops that we will need to jump through before we can actually get this program up and functioning and procure new resources. But we've been very hard at work creating the first of these requirements, which is the governance agreement. And so that's basically an agreement that all the participating communities will need to sign that will illustrate how we make decisions. Because our utility and our regulators were very clear, they didn't want 23 different programs for 23 different communities. They wanted one program, and then all of the eligible communities can either kind of take it or leave it. And so that just takes a lot of governmental coordination. And so we've been working on that. We are hoping to have a near final draft of our governance agreement by January of the upcoming year. And there are then still several steps after that. So those are the main things that I wanted to cover, and I'm happy to, answer any questions when we get to that part of the discussion.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Christopher. It's kind of exciting to see the kind of the statewide effort on that as well. Why don't we go ahead and turn it over to Abby and Tammy? I don't know how the two of you are planning on presenting, but it's all yours.
I think Abby's gonna go, and then I've got a few slides.
All right, that sounds fine to me. Let me share my 2 slides. There you go. So I'm Abby Finnis. I work for a nonprofit here in Minneapolis called the Great Plains Institute. We work on a wide range of energy issues, from federal policy to decarbonizing the transmission sector to down to the local community level, which is where I work, helping mostly Minnesota cities, but also cities in Wisconsin, Iowa, and other areas in the Midwest with energy and climate technical assistance. So I'm just gonna kind of highlight a few cities that I've been working with and the goals that they have, and then what that starts to amount to when you start to add it up. This is just kind of a sample of some of the cities that have renewable energy or carbon goals within their communities. There's more than this in Minnesota, certainly, but these are some of the key highlights. And you'll see kind of on the left side where those goals are coming from. There's a number of goals that are, passed through resolution or included in climate action plans. Some cities include their goals in their comprehensive plans and then create climate energy action plans out of that. There's mayor proclamations, a wide variety of different ways that, oops, shoot. I'm just pushing buttons over here. So a wide variety of different pathways for cities to institute some of these goals. And then on the right, it really just highlights what some of those renewable energy or solar goals more specifically are for cities. And most of them tend to be 100% renewable electricity. And you can get into the conversation of, well, what does that mean? We can go out and buy a whole bunch of renewable energy credits and call ourselves 100% renewable energy, right? So there's different pathways to pursue that. And I think that that's something that a lot of cities are grappling with. What exactly does that mean, both in terms of their city operations, which was just highlighted in Salt Lake City, as well as these community-wide goals. But you'll also see that a number of cities have specific capacity targets or in-boundary goals that are really directed at trying to achieve those benefits from distributed solar. So you're going to get direct economic savings from that. You're going to get jobs created, all sorts of kind of those local immediate benefits, but you don't necessarily get that renewable energy credit. And so those are kind of the things to think about and to weigh what your true priorities are around that. But that's something that I tend to emphasize with communities that I'm working with when they set 100% renewable goals. That's great. And most of these communities, I think, are all, except for Rochester, in Excel territory. And Excel territory is one of the leading utilities in terms of rapidly decarbonizing their electricity generation mix. And so how do you think about what your utility is already doing and what you can do on top of it and make sure that you're capturing some of those local benefits? And so that's really what this kind of 10% in boundary target is, looking at the rooftop space on commercial buildings, residential buildings, what are some parking lot areas or other underutilized land that you can put some of the solar energy systems into. So this is just kind of a quick snapshot of what these goals amount to in terms of capacity. And again, this is just a small handful of some of the cities that have some of these solar goals in their communities. And it ends up being 585 or so megawatts of solar capacity, which is a pretty significant amount of solar in just in a few cities. And so, when you start thinking about resource planning, when you start thinking about distribution planning with your utility, it's super important to have those partnerships and those conversations and understand where this solar is intending to go and what that means for the system and what that means for the local community in terms of reaping some of those benefits as well and maximizing, the amount of solar that we can put near the load so that we don't also have to, we can try to minimize what the impact on the transmission system is as well. So I will hand it over to talk more about partnerships from Tammy.
Perfect. I think I've got a few slides here also. Can you see? Perfect. Good. I'm Tammy Gundersick with Excel Energy, and I manage our Partners in Energy program, which Jeremy talked about in Eau Claire, where we work with some of the different communities we serve, putting together energy action plans. For those of you, there we go, not familiar with Excel, we're a large utility. We've got kind of a northern chunk and a southern chunk, and working with communities, it really has historically been the tale of those two chunks a bit. 3.7 million electric customers, so I think about 5 times as many as Mid-America, if that helps. Going into it, gosh, in the mid-90s, we did a merger that kind of formed the main part of those northern and southern parts. And it used to be NSP up north, which was a very community-focused, kind of pro-community friendly, good relationship utility with kind of strong ties. Versus down in Colorado, we had the public service company where there was a lot more contentious element to it. There were a number of battles within the communities we served. The systems that kind of made up the utility were older, and so there were a lot of reliability issues. So some of those core services weren't there, much less to talk about building relationships on additional things. We are recognized kind of for some of our pro-environmental stance. Wind, energy efficiency, we've got a really broad demand side management or DSM program. Our carbon emission reductions, we've committed to reducing carbon 80% by 2030 over a 2005 baseline, and then up to 100% by 2050. For community resources, some of the things that we've put in place is we've got all our programs and services, and there's account managers that work with the different cities, as well as our community service managers who kind of manage any operational issues within the cities. But then some of the tools we've kind of set up since about 2014 we've got something called community energy reports. If you go to our website, where you can get pretty much an Excel spreadsheet for any city or county we serve that reports the number of customers, the usage for those geographic parameters, the emissions that you can calculate, some program participation for our DSM programs, our renewable program, that sort of thing. So really tools to inform communities and help set baselines, as well as kind of track year to year what's going on there. There's definitely challenges with it. And I think for utilities of a smaller size to come in and set up those partnerships, it becomes increasingly challenging just because of some of that data management and the amount of IT resources required. We've got Partners in Energy, which is probably like, if you think of community energy reports, any community can get one. They might not be posted there right now, but if they put their name in the queue, the next time they create them, they work them into the system and they go forward. Partners in Energy is kind of our next one, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But what we do with that is work with the communities we serve to put together energy action plans and implementation. It's currently available in Minnesota and Colorado and Wisconsin. And what's really different from that is, well, there's probably 2 things when we put it together. It's the first program or product that we put together that wasn't based on a metered relationship. So it wasn't a resident and it wasn't a commercial business. It was looking at that community as our customer. And so that was a huge mind shift for us. Plus, back then we have very tight kind of portfolios of products. We've got our conservation products, our renewable products, and a lot of that still exists today. But Partners in Energy also went across those. So as we worked with communities, we tried not to look at them as siloed offerings, but really look at those community goals that they set up in their plans and put together a mix that was really most appropriate to support what they wanted to do. Another type of relationship we have in Wisconsin and Colorado, and I think Eau Claire is our single Wisconsin example, is an Energy Future Collaborative, and where Partners in Energy kind of works down at the tactical level or with kind of that worker bee level. The Energy Future Collaboratives are agreements made with more input from the councils and the mayors, the city managers at that higher level, where the city and the utility work together to identify common goals. And then after that, a work plan's put in place, and often Partners in Energy can be used to support that work plan to get it moving forward. That exists, as I mentioned, with Eau Claire, and I think with 8 communities in Colorado. So a pretty small sampling. We are trying to figure out an effective way to grow that and leverage the resources we've got. And then the Minneapolis Clean Energy Partnership, which really is pretty resource intense for the utilities and the city, but has got some great success stories around it, and I think kind of served as that flagship example to really get things moving for Excel. Partners in Energy, as I mentioned, is the program I'm most familiar with. Normally it's about a 2-year collaborative with the city. We provide facilitation and a process to put a plan together. That takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months. And then we support implementation in Colorado and Minnesota. And the difference there is just the funding mechanism for our conservation programs. It allows us to have the budget dollars to be able to put towards that effort. So far, we've served a little over 50 communities. We do have, I think, 3 going right now in Wisconsin, and we'll be starting with Ashland, our 4th one, at the end of the year. I think there's some of the normal benefits that you think of, and I think you always hear that, you know, the utility's regulated, they've got to do this, and it kind of fits in that model that it helps us hit some of our regulated goals. But a lot of the things we see from it are a lot more challenging to measure and put a metric around it. It's that customer satisfaction. And by that, it's not just that we're able to get more of our information and programs out, but even at that community level and our communities being more satisfied with Xcel Energy as their service provider. It gives us additional channels to sell our programs. By working with the different cities to implement their plans, we're able to promote our conservation programs, our electric vehicle offerings, things like that, through new channels and reach new people. It was interesting. We really tracked it when we first started the program. Now it's kind of been in the field long enough where it gets a little more challenging. But not only could we see a growth in our programs, but the people who participated in them were people who had never participated before. And so it really was that by working with those cities and getting those messages through there, whether it was the credibility of the cities or just seeing those messages in new places, it helped get more of our word out too. Insights into product development. Partners in Energy started back in 2014, which is about when the Minneapolis program started and some of our other offerings. And if you remember back that long, we were going through some pretty dramatic changes in the utility industry, or at least starting the dramatic changes. I think we've kind of gone into this constant cycle now, but at that point we were all kind of shell-shocked. And so to be at that table with the communities, hearing what they wanted and where their priorities were, and having some of those discussions, not only where we could tell them more what we had in a new fashion, where we kind of had their ear, they had our ear too, and they could tell us what they wanted. It wasn't necessarily all sustainability back then. Now I think it's almost kind of become the common theme, but back then it was economic development or just clean energy or just, you know, a place where people can find out who their actual energy utility is. building strong communities, you know, we think by helping our communities kind of achieve their energy goals, it certainly gives us a better foundation for our customer base. And then just the idea that together we really do achieve more. We're not spending energy fighting each other. We're all going in one common direction. I think those are my slides.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Tammy and Abby. We appreciate that. So now we're going to go ahead and move into an opportunity for question and answers. I know Jeremy and Kathy are going to have to hop off pretty soon for a legislative event. So if there's any questions specific to them, we'll start with the city's Des Moines City staff and council people to see if you have any questions for them real quick.
Hi, this is Carl Voss speaking. For Dane County, is it just the public works plows that you're converting to, hold on here, I got it, compressed natural gas, or other vehicles also in the fleet?
So in our highway department, almost half of their overall vehicles are compressed natural gas at this point. They've got a few cars and light duty vehicles. They managed to find some vehicles on some amazing deal somewhere in the country and kind of purchase some, but the bulk of those are those heavy duty vehicles because, and somebody had asked this question in the chat, so while we're fast electrifying light duty vehicles, it's not as clear how quickly electrification will come to something like snowplows. Those are really heavy vehicles. They push a lot of load. I mean, nobody's expecting that in the next 5 or 6 years kind of thing. So the RNG is a good investment there because we feel pretty confident we've got at least 1 and maybe 2 vehicle life cycles before we're looking at. But there are some, I mean, right now we've got some pickup trucks and some, I don't know, kind of bobcatty equipment and different things that the highway department has that they're getting as compressed natural gas too.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, I'm going to let you go ahead and facilitate the question and answer part. I didn't mean to jump in before you.
That's fine. So yeah, we want to at least give a chance for other Des Moines City Council members or city staff to pose some questions, especially for the Wisconsin participants.
Hi, this is Jeremy, City of Des Moines Sustainability Program Manager. I wanted to follow up with Jeremy, the other Jeremy, and ask whether you've been able to account for any of the non-energy benefits that have resulted from the transitions to more of the renewable energies. You mentioned that, actually, sorry, this is for SLC. You mentioned that that you've seen a 2% increase to energy bills from the renewables projects you've implemented, but I don't know if you've been able to quantify any of the non-energy savings from that.
Oh yeah, so that 2% cost is just our projection for when the first year of operation of the big new solar farm. So we don't have any actuals on that yet, but that is, yeah, that is just the on-bill costs. It doesn't take any account of air pollution or the cost of air pollution or anything like that.
Great, thank you.
Carl Voss again. I'll ask another question. regarding electrical rates in Des Moines. The Mid-American rates are pretty low here. That's why we have so many farms that are from Google, Facebook, Microsoft. So I'm challenged to understand how solar energy is going to work and be efficient for homeowners and business with a significant payback before it. Tough to justify, I guess. I know personally for the building that my wife and I own in the East Village, it's like a 17-year payback, and it's pretty tough to justify. So how do you see that working in the Des Moines area when what are we at, like 8 or 9 cents a kilowatt hour for Mid-American, excuse me.
Yeah, so who wants to address that? Tammy, you're smiling at least.
I was about to say I could take a little tackle on that one. I'm not sure it's exactly what you'll want to hear. You know, it is a challenge. And when your rates, they sound like they're even lower than Excel's, and it's a challenge up there without some sort of subsidy. But we are seeing some pretty significant drops in the technology for solar power. And if you look at the subscriber programs, where I think Salt River had it, and I'm not sure if Mid-America is interested in that sort of thing, but I believe they actually have one too. I'm not 100% sure. But where they can build the large solar installations, you get some economies of scale going. And where you don't have the solar at your actual site, you still have those benefits and the renewable energy credits, that capability to claim you're using renewable energy transfers with those. So that's an option, as well as it may well be that where those higher energy cost areas right now are seeing higher solar penetration, as those markets kind of get built out and the technology continues to drop, it should be that Des Moines is then a more viable market.
When you say Salt River, are you talking about Arizona?
Yeah, Salt Lake City, sorry.
I could jump in too, Brian, if that's okay.
Yep.
So I'm looking at the average rates, and of course the average rate is sort of can be a little misleading because, you know, commercial rates for energy are a lot lower than residential typically. But anyway, I'm looking at the list, and so I see Iowa's like 14 and Utah's at number 6. So yes, I do think for a rooftop installation, depending upon the policies that the utility uses, you know, net metering or some variation on net metering, you know, that's one thing. If you're looking at the utility scale where the big solar farm plugs into the bigger electric network, yeah, that solar is very cost effective. I mean, our investor utility, Rocky Mountain Power, in their last plan, they published a plan in 2019, well, a 2019 plan last year. They said they were, I mean, the cost of new solar was in many cases less than the cost to run the existing coal plants, which is just remarkable. I mean, I don't think people thought that was on the horizon. I mean, even maybe 5 years ago, but anyway, it is what we're seeing. And so I just wanted to say, like, in Utah, you know, we do have really a low average cost of energy. I mean, electricity nationwide, but still solar can really make sense here.
I wanted to follow up on that, Christopher, because you mentioned something, I think it was the utility resource plan. And Rocky Mountain Power is your investor-owned utility, and they're, I believe, a sister utility to Mid-American in the Berkshire family. And so they went through a public resource planning process where stakeholders got input. Like, talk a little bit about how that worked and the result that led to, because I think we've seen similar results in Iowa if a resource planning process is used. I mean, we just saw announcements, the same thing with solar being the chosen resource and saving a ton of money over coal in IPL service territory, which is in eastern Iowa.
Yeah, that's a great question. And if I'm getting too in the weeds, please somebody cut me off before I put everybody to sleep. But yeah, our rules in Utah require our big investor-owned utility to do this 20-year plan, and then they update it they redo it every 2 years. And in our case, we've got a very interesting multi-state situation going on where we have PacifiCorp. PacifiCorp has territory in Washington, Oregon, a little bit in California, but then they also have territory in Utah, Idaho, and Wyoming. And so all of the commissions look at these plans, right, every 2 years, and they say, well, does the plan meet our expectations and requirements, or does it not? And so one of the commissions in the Northwest said, we don't think the plan is necessarily doing enough scrutiny of the ongoing costs of our coal plants. And so for the last iteration of the plan, there was a lot more focus put on the costs of those existing coal plants. And as they kind of sharpen their analysis, I think that's where some of these opportunities became a lot more visible. But I don't necessarily think it would have played out exactly that way if there hadn't been at least one commission asking for more deeper analysis, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so what you're saying is you need to actually look into the costs in real detail, because there's potentially huge savings out there if you actually look into those costs.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily always an easy thing to do. I mean, I know that the PacifiCorp modeling team was like working 14-hour days and all this sort of stuff to try to create something brand new. But now that they've done it once, they've updated their software, and now I think it should be a lot better going forward, and we'll see what this year says. But yes, I mean, I don't necessarily think all utilities will look with a very sharp lens at the ongoing cost of what they've already invested. They sometimes will narrow their focus only on new stuff. But if you do that, you miss these trade-offs where you say, well, actually we could replace an older asset and we'll save money.
Yeah, I wanted to maybe bring it back to the Midwest. In Tammy, Xcel has a lot of service territory in the upper Midwest, which is, sort of in the Iowa range, and wanted to see if what your experience has been doing that sort of analysis. I mean, is Xcel looked at that, and how did their coal plants fare in that analysis?
In there, we have looked at that, and even as we bid out new generation, we see the cost of renewables being very practical to pursue. It's one of those things where when you look at our energy mix and some of those carbon-free commitments, we could not have come forward and made those commitments had the cost not been so improved over operating. It's one of those where, gosh, you'd like to be able to go out and say you can do that, but we have a responsibility to be cost effective and serve all customers regardless, blah, blah, blah. And so it really did need to model out. And we have been able to do that. It's driven some plant closures, as mentioned, and we have more plants that where we do anticipate closing them. I mean, it's a utility, nothing's for sure. Everything's on a regulatory platform and everything. But it's exactly what Christopher says. And even, you know, given the cost effectiveness, and we've got the Midwest, we've got room for solar, we've got great wind farms. We've had a lot of solar conversations here, but wind is really an important asset for Excel.
I just want to build on that with like two kind of pieces that have been in the chat a little bit. For folks who don't pay as much attention to renewables, I saw these stats earlier today. Since 2009, so in the last decade, the cost of wind has dropped 70% and the cost of solar has dropped 92%. So that's like a big piece of this. The other thing is that we're increasingly seeing like those server farms that the council member mentioned, wanting to commit to 100% clean energy. You know, Apple says all of their operations, all of their electricity will be carbon free, I think in the next like year or something they're saying. Google's saying 2030. All of that also drives what the utilities have to do in this, because they've got big customers who are demanding those changes. And that's another thing communities want to think about. Are you going to have an energy mix that draws those businesses to you locally? Sorry, Carrie.
I was just going to quickly just say thank you to Jeremy Greger before he hopped off, but he has hopped off. I also just wanted to add one other thing that we do know, that in 2019, 40% of all the new electric generation came from solar. That's more than any other source of electric generation in the country, and that's because solar is becoming more and more cost effective. Anyway, continue with the discussion and questions. This is good.
Hey, this is Jeremy again. I had a quick question for Tammy. I'm wondering if you could touch on reliability impacts at all related to the transitioning to the renewables and what you've looked at for those impacts.
Reliability is definitely outside my expertise. I'm more the community programs, but it is an issue. I think as I watch this chat, I see the cost of storage going down and everything. And I think once we kind of master that, it'll give us a little more security on the grid as we bring solar on. But it's one thing even with wind, as we look towards what we're doing with metering and infrastructure and time of use. And, you know, we've got so much wind power at night when we don't have anybody demanding it. There's as much reliability concern, you know, as not having enough energy in there. So it really is that balancing act. And I think it's driving us all to kind of need to be more aware of how we use energy. It's not just kind of that given anymore. So we see the offerings kind of driving people to have to think about, you know, when they turn the dishwasher on and that sort. I think another area in Colorado, we're working with a community where they're making it mandatory in the development to have solar on the home. And for us, we're like, just because the grid isn't in a position in there to have that reliable. So kind of what we've kind of settled on is if they can have a 3 kW system, they can have solar on every home, but it won't be quite so risky as we look at trying to operate that and make sure their reliability stays good. So it's one of those technology challenges.
Just to follow up, Tammy, I mean, and others can weigh in too, it sounds like part of what you were saying is, you know, when a community is making a broad commitment across, you know, not just the municipal government, but the community as a whole, that there is an opportunity there to have a more collaborative process for planning things like those kind of developments, or, you know, EV charging or demand management. That it sounds like, you know, without that, you're left engaging with customers, you know, individually often, and that this kind of resolution could open up possibilities for savings and local benefits, new technologies, things that could be pretty exciting. in addition to if people just mandate it, on their own, that can be a challenge for you. But it sounds like the opposite is more so what you've experienced.
And yeah, I mean, it really is interesting because there's such a need to collaborate at so many levels these days. I don't know if you've heard, we always kind of get some bad press around community solar gardens. And a lot of that has to do just with the planning and the grid not being in a position to handle it. And so all at once, you're that last community solar garden on there. And instead of just having the normal hookup charge, it's the hookup charge plus the grid reinforcement. And so your business model goes out the window and the utility is looking bad. But, it's one of those where you couldn't charge the earlier ones the same amount to have it all equal, right? There's all these different places and with solar, and then even at that community level. I'm not sure what Mid-America's motto is, but what we found are some great opportunities to pilot things, even working with communities and have discussions. And it might be that it's at that smaller level of how outreach works better, or how you get people to actually listen to the message or sign up for renewables. But it really does give a lot of insight that we can take out to our whole market, as well as it gives hopefully that community that's participating a little more sense of success and definitely more achievement.
So another question I was going to pose, a lot of you gave examples of working together with multiple cities and working at the state level to help facilitate some of this transition. I'm curious, what advice you have for, a city like Des Moines. We don't have quite as established a statewide network as you do in Minnesota of sustainable cities. I think, like others mentioned, there's times in our state it feels like a barrier to some of this. There's other times where a lot of you mentioned, working at the state level is opening up new opportunities. So yeah, just what sort of recommendations you would make as we consider making a resolution at the city level, and how we should be thinking about those state level partnerships?
So I can take a shot at that because we're sort of in the middle of this in Wisconsin. So at this point in Wisconsin, about 1 in 3 people in Wisconsin live in a community with ambitious climate goals. And that's Eau Claire and Menominee and La Crosse and Green Bay and Milwaukee and a number of communities in Dane County. And we've just started to have those communities come together in discussions and sort of talk about some of the things that are challenges for us together. Tammy, you might be glad to hear, we very often talk about how lucky Eau Claire is because of the support they get from Excel, which is, in Wisconsin, every utility is in a slightly different place about how they're supporting those community efforts. But we've also got some state barriers. In Wisconsin, local governments can't set their own building codes. That's a state function, and those state building codes aren't helping us reach our goals. So we've really just started this conversation about how do we potentially talk in one voice when we're talking to the commission or to legislators about particular things, and really just make people aware of how much of the state is already in this aspirational place and trying to support that. So we're kind of trying to figure that out and looking at some of those other states as models for how that might work.
I'll jump in as well. So one part of my job is to facilitate and convene cities around climate and energy issues. And so we have a network that we call the Community Energy Network, and that consists of, regularly about 15 cities, but more like 25, 30 that it reaches in Minnesota. And we convene these cities on specific topics. Last year it was monthly, this year it's quarterly, talk about lessons learned, sharing successes, getting them to learn from one another and to push through some of their initiatives either together or off of what they've learned from other cities. We've also used that as a platform to drive some of this more policy and regulatory action as well. And so we have a group of cities that are starting to come up with what the NRDC is going to use as a national model for trying to impact policy. So just like Kathy said, we also don't have the authority to impact our building codes in Minnesota. And so there's a very concerted effort this year to get legislation passed to enable cities to adopt advanced building energy standards for their communities. There's also a number of cities that are joining together in Xcel Energy territory to make sure that the integrated resource plan is reflective of their local goals. So I think that, you know, once you start getting cities talking to each other and getting more comfortable knowing one another, then you really start being able to accelerate what you can accomplish. And I'm really curious about the Renewable Energy Act and the Community Renewable Energy Act in Salt Lake City, or in Utah rather, I guess it's statewide. And so, just kind of coming together and realizing you're much stronger, together. What are those other peer cities in Iowa, or what are some of those other strategically important cities or very ambitious cities that you can collaborate with to advance your shared goals?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I do think, I know Eric Giddens from the University of Northern Iowa is on the call, and Eric has been, Eric's students did the greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the city of Des Moines and has worked with a number of other cities around that. So I think that's potentially a really natural source for us to kind of connect and partner with other cities that they're working with that are moving this direction as well.
Yeah, and Carrie, you mentioned that it was part of the Green Subsidies program as well, and that's a statewide sustainability program in Minnesota that 145 versus cities and 4 tribal nations are a part of. And Wisconsin has a similar program, the Wisconsin Green Tier program, and I think Iowa is starting to think about getting something like that set up. And all of these programs are part of this larger national network of similar type programs. And so really just kind of getting rooted into some of these pieces that are already moving, and being able to get the resources that are available and just have that be used for your efforts as well.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have just a few minutes. I was trying to skim back through the chat and see what we haven't addressed. So I knew there were several questions about storage and what you see on the horizon, including chemical batteries, but also things like water, compressed air. So how storage could fit into our thinking as we look at clean energy 24/7 and other companies that are setting those types of goals. So I don't know who wants to address that. Tammy, you might have thoughts, or if other cities have experience of projects, with storage integrated.
I'm not familiar with any using kind of water or compressed air that have been newly constructed. Out in Colorado, I have gone to a couple sites just where they use the pumping off peak. It just kind of more taking advantage of the natural resources that they've got, which is great if you have it available to kind of look at it a little differently and re-harness it. For energy storage, I shot an answer out there. What I know of is Xcel has worked with Panasonic quite a bit out in Colorado at a demo site. It's kind of the next stop on the train if you're headed into Denver from the Denver airport, so out by Aurora, as well as we've worked a little bit with residential. There's another utility out there by the name of United Power, who has worked with the city of Erie, putting in some large storage batteries. And both of those, for the Panasonic, if you go to our website, I can sure get somebody the link to send out on the information we have, or the different write-ups. We have a number of different case studies, I think, kind of through the past 5 years available. The United Power one with Erie is probably on United Power's website, or I can get a contact name at the city of Erie if that's any help. But I think right now the economics of it are such that without it being more for that educational purpose, people aren't really pursuing installs. There's a lot of aspirations and thoughts about how it would work in, especially with the kind of newfound emphasis on resiliency and some of those sites that hopefully we'll see more kind of working into mainstream, but right now it's not there.
I can add just a little, add 2 cents, which I found really interesting. So going back to Pacific Corp's 2019 plan, they did a really interesting thing where toward the end, they told their model, their computer model, you can't pick solar by itself. So if you're gonna pick solar, you've got to pick solar paired with a battery. And when they did that, they found that the model picked just as much solar with batteries, and the total system cost was lower than if it had just picked solar alone. So this was mind-blowing to me, but I think it basically has to do with the fact that when you're adding storage to your overall electric system, you're able to operate it. You're able to realize some efficiencies in terms of how you operate it. And so I believe that Pacific Corp, they did a big request for proposals for new, I believe battery was one of the technologies that they asked for bids on. And everybody's eagerly awaiting to hear some of the summary results from that request for proposals, because I think we'll see some average prices for solar and wind and batteries and paired systems. And so I'm optimistic that we'll see some batteries built within the next 3 to 4 years from that request for proposals.
Yeah, that's exciting. I'd like to stay in touch with that and be interested to see what comes out of that.
All right, any last question?
Carl Voss again. I raised my hand earlier. Should a policy that we're considering for Des Moines, should that have any ties to transportation to it? We've been talking primarily here about sources of carbon-free energy, but the personal automobile contributes so much to the carbon. Is that something for a separate discussion, or should it be part of this?
I'm happy to just take a quick stab at that. I know for Salt Lake City, we've kind of parceled them out differently. So we focused on the renewable electricity first. And then actually, I believe it was just last night, our city council had a work meeting and reviewed a electrified transportation resolution. And so I think the way we viewed it is if we can make sure to be generating our electricity from renewable sources, then we've got a great pathway to decarbonize our transportation, because we can go with electric vehicles, and then the electric vehicles are being charged by the renewable sources. So that's how we've looked at it. I mean, I think you could do it either way, but that's just I think how we've approached that issue.
So for example, if you were had new homes under construction, and many of those include new garages, if you at least roughed in the a 50 amp circuit into the garage, that's going to make acquisition of that electric vehicle make a lot more sense. If you have to trench a line to your garage and you're just hobbled by a household outlet, I mean, it doesn't make as much sense. So, and I don't know what in terms of new construction for a garage, what it can't be very much for just a drop in the garage. I mean, that's basically the same amperage that a electric dryer consumes. So it's just a line out there. But I mean, we're not thinking about 5 or 10 years down the road, how many more electric vehicles there are going to be on the street and in the garages too. So
I think
Yeah,
it's great. Oh yeah, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I was just going to add that there's a lot of signals from both the utility sector and at the national level now of more aggressive EV transition policies coming forth. And, EVs, I think one of the values they bring to this discussion is they represent load growth for electric utilities, since typically they're transitioning people from fossil fuel vehicles to grid-tied vehicles. And so that's a revenue opportunity for the utilities. And it creates an excellent opportunity to allow us at the community level to reduce emissions and tie in with the cleaner energy tied to that, but also get a win-win for everyone involved there on the policy side. So there's a lot of opportunity that cities are pursuing and utilities are pursuing with managed charging as well as a way to control demand from vehicles and help reduce demand, to a time when it's more affordable for folks to charge as well. And the cost of EVs and the cost of EV infrastructure is continually decreasing as well, similar to other renewable sources that are out there.
I was just going to say, I think Salt Lake City is looking at what we call an EV ready ordinance. So it doesn't go to the single detached, I'm going to use the wrong words because this is not my area of expertise, but it goes to multifamily. So it basically says if you're going to renovate a big multifamily or you're going to build a new one, then there needs to be at least some percentage of the parking stalls that are ready for EV, to your point. In other words, they've got the drops, but they don't have the charging stations. So we don't have that as part of it's not adopted yet, but it's something that I think we'll try to look at passing this year.
Yeah, thank you. So we are at time. I really want to thank our panelists very much. This was really great. And I appreciate city staff and city council that were able to join us and all of our attendees. We have recorded this and we'll share this recording out. But I'm wondering just real quick if Abby, Tammy, and Christopher, if you're willing to just drop, if you're open for people contacting you, if you'd be willing to drop an email in the chat that people can follow up with additional questions. Because I think this is really helpful and we truly appreciate all of this help as we move forward. I think we see the city of Des Moines being our capital city, that being a leader on this is important, and that this is definitely the direction that we have to go. And though it's challenging, I think we are a community that's up for the challenge to figure it out. So we're very thankful for the insight that you guys have given us.
So Carrie, I just wanted to, as we wrap up, just to remind folks, so we have a couple more events coming up related to this, including a solar tour that will be a virtual tour now. Jeremy, do you want to share some of these details? Jeremy, Karen?
Sure, I can do that. So task force members have been working hard to arrange a solar tour for December 10th with several local businesses Right now, I think we have the task forces lined up DART to talk about their installation and their EV buses and LEED certified facility. And then Kemen, Heather Christensen from Kemen will be speaking to their new 700 kW installation that they're working on. Waldinger Corporation and Brian, I think, was there one other that we had planned as to participate in that discussion?
We have the Wright School, and then CB Solar is also going to participate. And I'm going to drop the link, the registration link, in the chat so that everybody can see that. So that folks can register for that solar tour as well.
So is that something that will be set up so that several council members can attend rather than to worry about open?
Yes,
Thank you.
We apologize about that. There was a miscommunication because we thought we had it set up so everyone could attend. But yes, we are sending this to Kay to get on there so everybody will be able to attend.
Carrie, thank you for putting this together. I'm sure it took a lot of emails and phone calls and text messages to pull this off. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being part of it.
Yeah, well, and thanks to the panelists. I mean, it was great hearing about what's going on and really what's actually possible. You know, it really drives home, I think, the fact that we can make this transition and save money, create jobs all at the same time, and that folks around the country are already doing this work, and that we should be a part of that and can collaborate and can do more with everyone else. So appreciate that. And I've got a visitor.
Dinner must be ready, Josh.
Yeah. So thanks, everyone. Thanks to the task force for the work organizing it, but really appreciated hearing from folks doing this work around the country.
All right. Thank you, and good night, all.
Thanks for the invitation.
Everybody.
Thank you.